Okay, we're on. All right. Your name, your maiden, and married.
I'm Catherine Butler. My name is Catherine Viola Butler Spradley.
And your date of birth and place you were born.
I was born September the 3rd, 1947 in Thomas, Oklahoma.
And the name of your children are.
My children are Shelley Dawn Spradley Martin
And your parents' names?
and Salida Frances Spradley DeGoff.
And your parents' names are.
My parents are Harley and Annabelle Butler.
And your grandparents.
And my grandparents are Emma Viola Hall, and I'm talking about the ones that I knew. And she was married to Robert Porter Martin, who I did not know, and then married to Perry Francis Hall, who I knew as a very young child. And then my other set of grandparents were James Kay and Francis Butler.
Okay. Now you get the bonus question. How far can you go back?
As far as remembering things, I remember Grandpa Hall, and he died in 1957, and I remember him before that. I remember Grandpa Butler when they lived in Cordell. I'm not sure exactly what year that was, but that would have been my father's father. And I remember Grandmother Butler was a beekeeper, and Grandpa Butler would sit in the window and watch her rock the bees. But I would have been fairly young then.
Okay. Who's the oldest relative that you can remember?
I think probably Grandpa Hall. And I'm not sure if he was older or younger than Grandmother Hall. But I remember Grandmother Hall, Grandpa Hall. I remember Grandmother and Grandpa Butler. So they were all in that same age frame. So.
Any special memories?
Whoa, I have a lot of special memories. I wanted to read something to you, Leon, that I put together, hopefully sometime during this time we had together this weekend. And it struck me that I realized that unless we know who we were, we don't really know who we are. And so one night I got to thinking on this and thinking on this. So I wrote this little thing that I actually read at Delaine's 40th birthday, but I ran across it the other day and I thought it was very fitting. So I can't remember what I wrote, but I have it written down, so I'm going to read it to you. And it said that it is said that a person is the sum of his two parents, his four grandparents, and so on past, where memory really keeps watch. So we're really a sum of all those people that, like I talked about, and way beyond that. And most of us are so busy rushing to and fro in this crazy world that we don't give much thought to who we are or what made us the way we are. And we're so concerned with where we're going, how we're going to get there, or when we're going to arrive, that we're not really fully aware of even who we really are. So, and I think too that we forget that we're somebody special to people. And when we get together in family situations, we realize, how special we are. And I think sometimes that our actions are governed by maybe something our grandmother or our aunts and uncles told us, and so all those generations preceding us affect how we think and how we live our life. And I wrote on Delaine's thing, I said, from generation to generation to generation, our looks and our traits are passed on. You can tell that by looking around today. And every one of us have traits that are passed from our ancestors, from our mother and father, and then look on down to our children. And now I have grandchildren, and my son-in-law calls his little 4-year-old his little Butler child because she looks like a Butler, and he said she acts just like I do. And I think it's really neat that God designed us in a way that we could look at who we were and see who we are. So I just thought that was kind of neat.
It is very cool.
But I think I could look at my grandmother Hall, and I could look at my grandmother Butler, and I'm a combination of both of those, because grandmother Hall was a meticulous housekeeper. Ironed her sheets, everything was meticulous. And my grandmother Butler, the best, kindest way I know to put it was she would rather be reading a book than cleaning her house. And so that was her top priority. And I'm a combination of that. I like my house to be meticulous, but I'd rather read a book. But I always think about what grandmother used to say about don't leave your dirty dishes in the sink overnight and blah, blah, blah.
That was Grandmother Hall.
Grandmother Hall would say that. And so guilt will not allow me to leave my house dirty, but I would rather be reading a book. And it was hard when you asked to pick one person, because Uncle Kelly had a big influence on my life, and Grandmother Hall, Grandmother Butler. Grandpa Butler was sick a lot, and all I really remember about him is being sick, and being in bed most of the time. So I would say, Grandpa Hall had a big influence, and I wasn't around him a terrible lot, and I don't know, let's see, you were born in 55, and he died in 57, so you probably wouldn't have been old enough to know him, but probably one characteristic that I could probably use to describe him was gentleness. He was a gentleman, and he was a kind man, and he always had gum for the kids, but I'm sure that it was during the early 50s, and he probably didn't have a whole lot of extra money to buy gum for 20 grandkids, so he would always tear it in half. He would take the gum out, tear it in half, and give each one of us a half.
Now this was Grandpa
This
who?
was Grandmother Hall's second husband. She was married to Robert Porter, and then he died when Mother and then Hazel and Kelly were young. And so several years later, then Grandmother married Grandpa Paul. And Grandpa Paul had been married, and his wife died. And he had a daughter named Greta, and that's Greta Latham. And so Grandpa Paul and Grandmother Martin Paul got married. And I always remember it because he was so kind and so gentle. Someone said, well, how else could he be? Because Grandmother Hall, I don't think I ever saw her lose her temper. It was interesting because were you there when I was telling the story about the boiled raisin cake recipe?
Yes.
Well, I'd asked for it several times, and about the third and fourth time I asked for it, she framed it and mailed it to me. So I know she probably did lose her patience, but Lavetta and I were talking that we really don't remember her being an impatient woman. And Grandmother Hall and Grandmother Butler both were kind of women before their time, because they did things women just didn't do back then. Like Grandma taught school, Grandma Butler taught school. Grandmother Hall owned the business. She owned the laundry, and she did wallpapering, and they just were big influences in my life.
Very cool.
Like I said, it's hard for me to pick just one.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Lavetta. I am one of the twins. Laverne and I were the twins. We were 5 and 6 in the family. We were born on August 22nd, 1941. And
Where were you born?
oh yes, we were the first of the family born on the farm Dad bought down at the bottom of the hill. And
So you were actually born at the house, not in the hospital?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
In
So
Thomas.
Daddy had bought the farm sometime before we were born, sometime between.
Now, was it in the house they lived in when I was
Mhm.
born?
Yeah.
Okay.
It had been remodeled, you know, changes made, but it was that house. And
Lavetta K, right?
Lavetta K.
Lavetta K. Butler Lee.
And we were wanting to tell some stories of the grandparents, and one of
It can be grandparents. It could be aunts, uncles.
Okay. Some of the memories that I remember so much as a child was with the Barton side of the family, because as most of you know, we went to the Church of Christ there in Thomas, and we went to church. I can remember, that's what I could remember, going to church up there across from the hospital with the Walkers and all of those families. And I very distinctly remember when Grandpa Hull was baptized. And I remember, I don't remember when Aunt Hazel was baptized, but I do remember when Uncle Lee was. And Laverne and I were baptized there at that church also, there in Thomas.
Now, did Aunt Hazel and Uncle Lee go to church there with
Yes,
you? Okay.
They went to church with us. So consequently, it was not that far to where Grandma and Aunt Hazel lived. So after church, every Sunday, if we didn't all get together, Karen and I would go together somewhere. So I'd either go to her house or she would come home with me. So every Sunday of the world, as long as we lived up there, I can't ever remember any Sunday that we didn't go back and forth, you know, and spend the day together. And back then, we didn't do things on Sunday. Our whole day was devoted to going to church and being with family, and other than the chores on the farm were the only time that we did any work. And so it was family time, and I wish we could get back to that. I think that's where a lot of the bonding took place, and it's sad that we don't have that. So those memories that I had as a child is why they're so close. You know, the Barton side is closer to me for the sheer fact of all of that bonding that took place. We saw Daddy's family some on weekends, but it was usually after church on Sunday if we did it, and it was such a drive to get with their family. So we didn't do that as much as we did with the Barton side. But so it was kind of traumatic too when Aunt Hazel left, and this kind of all, my memory doesn't serve me well on dates as to when they moved to Weatherford, but it came within those few years of the time they moved to Weatherford, and then we started going to church at Sentinel. We quit going there in Thomas. So that was pretty traumatic to me, because then those ties started breaking a little because you didn't have the contact. But Karen and I, Aunt Hazel was always there. Mother didn't have as much time to do things with us, but she would still supply us with things that we needed to sew and do things like that. And Karen and I, way before Barbie dolls, we had little dolls that the same size as the Barbies. And you cannot believe the wardrobes that Karen and I made for those dolls. And back then, it was treadle machines, and Aunt Hazel, of course, had one, and Mother had one, so depending on whose house we were at, we would just make clothes. And so I'm sure that's where all of my sewing came from, that I had such a love for it. And I don't know if Karen continued with, I think she did continue to sew, maybe not to the extent I did. But many Sunday afternoons, we were in there doing those treadle machines. And then as we got older, by the time they went to Weatherford, of course, we were older and we did more adult things. I remember getting together with her on occasions. But I remember all the fond times at Grandma's house, going up there and spending time with Grandma. And we talked last night about how hardworking Grandma was. She was very hardworking, and I remember her coming in so dead tired, but she always had time for you, to do things with you and for you, and patience of, so much patience. But yet, we knew how much Grandma loved us, even though I don't ever remember Grandma coming up and hugging, just hugging and doting over you. But the love just reeked from that woman. And she didn't need the hugs. And I would go to her house. I don't know how this worked out, who got to spend the night, how this worked. We'd trade off getting to spend the night at Grandma's house. To me, the highlight of staying at Grandma's house, Grandma's bedroom was always so pretty. You remember before she divided her house up and she had that little bedroom at the front of her house, that all the pretty bedroom furniture. And I always thought she had the most gorgeous lingerie. And the highlight of the staying at Grandma's house was sleeping in Grandma's gowns. You always got to sleep in one of Grandma's silky gowns with her. And you slept with her.
Oh.
And so she made you feel so special. And from a large family, that was important, to have some one-on-one time with Grandma. And I'm sure Mother realized that, and I'm sure Grandma realized that. But she did it with all of us.
Wow.
And even though I enjoyed going up and seeing the TV at Grandma's house, that wasn't important to me. The fact that you got to be up there and just being with Grandma. And but how patient she was and how loving she was, without being the doting grandmother. And I get to looking at myself sometimes and knowing that I'm different than a lot of the other family members with my emotions. I can see my grandmother Hull in me, that you can love without being so verbal and visually affectionate. It was just there. Mm-hmm. And some were talking this morning about going to Grandma's. Leon was about going to Grandma's house for lunch, and I did that many days. Would walk down. I'm surprised we didn't cross paths.
Had different lunch hours.
Yes. I guess that's what it was.
However, you would have been graduated by the time he started school.
True.
Because the year I started to school, you graduated that year.
Mm-hmm. So, but there were a lot of fond memories of doing that. But at the same token, I've never thought of being like my grandmother Butler. But at the same token, when I look at myself and my backyard, that didn't come from my grandmother Hull or my mother. That came from my grandmother Butler, the love of the soil and the beauty of flowers and nature. And so we have both sides, in our blood.
How did you, I always found this real fascinating, how you and Laverne got your names.
As I understand it, that back at the time we were born, people would come to visit the parents with twins or multiple births, and they would bring names. And Laverne and Lavetta were names that were
That's why
brought.
I heard it too. I always thought that was
Yeah.
neat.
that it wasn't family names or anything. It was, well, we liked that combination.
Mhm.
And so,
That's neat.
but it was very fun. And this may not be what you're looking for, but it was very fun being a twin, because, and especially a brother-sister combination. There was no competition, and I always had my buddy beside me, and I have never felt insecure and
Wow.
alone, because, and I think it probably a lot of it stemmed from
Wow.
that I always had my brother right there with me, because we were in classes together. And
They didn't separate you like they do
no,
now.
right. And I can see where the separation was good now, looking back at that, because yes, we were compared with our grades, and I did not make the grades Laverne did, and they would be on me pretty heavy because I didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because if he can do it, you can do it, and that might have been true.
You were probably busy socializing.
That's probably. But he wasn't. He didn't have a word to say.
No
No.
way.
He never socialized,
He
right?
never socialized. But anyway, that was the fun part of being a twin, and it's always easy to identify yourself to somebody that knows the family. I said, okay, I was one of the twins.
Very good.
Okay. I'm Leota Fern Butler Smith, and I was born August 4th, 1953 in Thomas, Oklahoma. I'm the 12th of the 15, and one of the things that always identified me was that being the 12th, the same doctor delivered all of us, and Dr. Ryan, and I was delivered free because I was the 12th, and he said it was cheaper by the dozen, so I didn't cost him nothing. So I've made up for it since, I'm sure, but I think that for me, the cousins, and like with Aunt Hazel and Uncle Lee and them, mainly what I know about them are from the stories I've heard. Because by the time I came along, they were talking last night that they thought that Aunt Hazel and Uncle Lee moved from Thomas when Richard was like a junior. Because he played football, and LaClyda was saying that they were all upset because he was their star football player. So I don't know what year that would have been, but it was before I really remember much about it. So by the time I was old enough to remember, they had moved to Weatherford, and that was what I found humorous about what you were saying, is that they moved away and it was 17 miles, you know, and that seemed so far back then.
Yeah.
And even with me as a child growing up, that trip to Weatherford or Clinton was far away.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, I drive 45 minutes into Oklahoma City, you know, so, but I do remember some about going to Aunt Hazel's when she lived in Weatherford, and I remember one Christmas, Glenda and I think Leon and Larry and I all got skates, those skates that you had the key that you put it on your shoe. They weren't skates that fit on your feet, they were actually attached to your shoes. And I can remember Mother and Daddy going to visit Aunt Hazel, and we took our skates because she had a sidewalk in front of her house, and so we got to go down there and skate. And there's just, since Leon started talking about kind of doing this history, I mean, it's just like a flood of memories come. So every time I talk with somebody, or I keep thinking, well, I don't really, there's just a lot of memories. And when you talk about grandmother being a hard worker, I think that really transferred onto mother, and then a lot of our brothers and sisters. And because I don't know Karen and that family as well, but imagine that they are also very, very hard workers.
Okay.
So, but one of the stories that came up last night was how that Aunt Hazel had gotten Mother started selling cakes in Weatherford, and how we used to deliver Angel Foods, 35 Angel Food cakes to people that Aunt Hazel knew in Weatherford. And I was sharing with them when I got home from school and smelled the Angel Food cakes cooking, I would just die, because I knew that in the kitchen was a stack of probably 15 or 20 Angel Food cake pans that I got to wash when I got home. But I never did really like Angel Food cakes until I got older, because when you have 30 or 40 of them at your house most of the time, you kind of get burnt out on them. But that was one of my fond memories. But I mainly know a lot about my ancestors by just some of my older brothers and sisters talking, because being one of the younger ones, I got to observe a lot. And I was sharing with Lavetta and LaClyda just the last few days about, I was probably 5 or 6 when they left home and went to Oklahoma City to work. And I can remember distinctly sitting on the bed in the bedroom watching them curl their hair and paint their fingernails. And, you know, as a little girl, I was just like in awe of, because they were almost old enough to be my mom. So, in fact, I've told a lot of people Lavetta was my mom most of the time, because she did so much of what a mother usually does for their children. And she did a lot of my sewing, and I would get packages in the mail, and Lavetta would have made our school clothes for that year. And that was always so neat. So I can go back and look at my school pictures and say, well, Lavetta made that dress. And so, anyway, I think that's probably what I remember right now. And I'm sure I'll have more to add later.
And you can. Okay, you're going.
Ready?
You're on.
Okay. Well, we want you to tell first, Leon wants you to tell just your name, and you want date of birth. Okay. Just your name and date of birth, just so we have it for the record. So, start with Richard.
Okay, I'm Richard Roof. I was born July 23rd, 1938. So I'm in the older bunch. Okay.
I'm Gary Ruff. I was born January 29th, 45. And I guess I'm one of about the middle.
And what is your parents' names?
Lee and Hazel. And my mother was born in 1913. My father was 2 years older than her. And I don't remember what.
Well, now I remember he was born in 1912.
Was it? I can't remember his birthday.
March 5th.
Mother's was October 1st.
Right.
So, Lavette and I had this conversation a while ago, and I know we talked a little bit with your brothers and sisters last night, but that you lived in Thomas until they thought, Richard, you were like a junior, because they said you were one of their star football players, and that they were upset when you moved to Weatherford.
It was in the winter time. It was it was the middle of the sophomore year.
Sophomore year, okay.
After football season.
Okay. And they were all talking about how upset they were that they were losing one of their star football players.
I think that's fantasy.
Didn't sound like it. Everybody agreed.
Wasn't at the time.
Yeah.
I was fast. Running was my attribute. My favorite sport was track. That was my football skills.
You could run fast.
Yes.
So you moved to Weatherford then.
Yes, our coach is Steve Graham, and he wanted to, I played in the line, guard, I think, and he wanted me to play halfback one game. So we practiced all week long, me carrying the ball, and I'd outrun everybody. We got in the game, and it was a different story. They caught up with me. So I think at halftime we traded back.
So how was the move? Let's see, how old would you have been, Gary, when you moved?
I was, I think, in the 3rd grade.
Okay, so you were pretty small, so it didn't impact you a huge amount.
No, it did not bother me much.
Yeah.
But I do remember that they would come and they would bring him home one of the businessmen in town would bring him home because he didn't have, there was no buses running, so he could practice.
So he could practice.
Y'all lived out in the country at that time.
Oh, okay.
See, I don't remember that.
They took turns. One of the businessmen would bring me home every night after football practice.
So I'm always curious because I'm one of the younger ones in the Butler family. What was it like having cousins with 15 cousins?
Great for me. I'd have sleepovers. Had to ride the school bus to your house, but I enjoyed it. We weren't allowed to go to the canyon.
By mother?
Your
By
mother made the rules.
Did you obey them though?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Well, none of you Butler kids would break the rules, so we had to follow
that
the
you
rules.
knew about.
What can you share with us about your parents? There was some special things that you.
Yeah. Can you answer some of that? I might square my memory.
No, not really. I know mother was just a sweet little old lady. She never had anything bad to say about anybody. Just a little frail, nice lady. And that's about, I brag on her all the time about that simple fact that they don't make them hardly like that anymore.
So do you guys remember, what are your memories like about with Grandma or Uncle Kelly or Uncle Lloyd? Do you guys remember Grandpa? I guess Grandpa Hall, because I don't remember much about him.
Yeah, I remember Grandpa Hall. He gave me knives all the time. I kept losing them. The pocket knives. We were buddies.
He always had that package of Dentyne chewing gum in his pocket. You never got a whole piece. You had to rip it in two. You remember that?
Actually, I know, because I was so small, but I heard the story last night, but you never got a whole piece of gum.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you got one.
You got one.
Well, that must be where I got my habit. I used to chew gum all the time and give other people half a piece for myself too.
I think that some of my most memorable times is when we had all get together at Grandma's and for our family dinners on Sunday. And Grandpa would go out and catch a couple of chickens out of the chicken coop, and we'd sit out there and pluck them and everything. Everything was fixed right there, And you'd have your scalding pot there, and you scald the chickens.
I remember the biscuits Grandma made. Special to me.
The lard can full of sugar cookies.
Yes.
The
The best. You can't get sugar cookies. You can't even make them like that.
Yeah, she always had that lard can full of sugar cookies.
I was always a handyman. I remember putting a linoleum floor. in Grandma's kitchen. It's a tile floor, really, out of linoleum. She's bragged on that for a long time.
Yeah. We lived in the old house out behind Grandma there, a block over. And I think it was Gerald and I stole a pack of my dad's cigarettes, Camels. And there was a little bridge down there. We sat down under that and smoked those cigarettes and just got sicker.
Well, we were talking earlier about that bridge. I thought it was just a plank across.
It might have been.
Was it bigger than that?
No, I'm sure that that's what it was. It seemed big at the time. Everything seemed bigger then.
Well, it sounds like to me you and Gerald were always kind of tangling up, doing things that.
We got in a little bit of mischief.
What are some other things that you would like to share with us about what you and Gerald used to?
Well, we burnt the barn down.
What? Seriously? I thought that was they were saying that last night, but I thought, nah, that can't be true.
Gerald denied it, though. We was having a contest, see who could light the most matches at once. Gerald burned his fingers and dropped it.
Oh, no! And it burnt the barn down?
Yeah.
I
Oh.
always thought you were guilty of that.
We was in it together.
How old were you?
Young.
Too young to know
And
better.
anyway, they pumped the well dry trying to put the barn out, and it upset Dad. It was a week before we have clean water to drink. It was all red water.
Well, I think it was my fault that the two horses foundered. I let them get out of the barn or something.
I was thinking, I don't think that was, I think the younger ones us went over there.
Ah,
Yeah, and left the door open. Yeah, I remember jumping off of that barn. I saw y'all doing flips and all of it. I tried it one time, landed right on my head like I killed myself. Y'all thought I was dead.
that was over. That was at the neighbor's house.
Yeah.
You were jumping off like a loft?
No, off the top of the barn into a haystack.
The roofing boards come over the edge of the barn, and kind of like a diving board, lightweight diving board.
We had some fun there, but I was a little bit small for that.
Weather didn't break a leg or something. So you guys actually, I learned this last night, you guys lived right next to Grandma there in Thomas for quite some time. That had to be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever run to Grandma's for
All
shelter?
the time. All the time. Yeah, those were some memorable times.
Others have told me that I had scarlet fever when I was young, and I was quarantined at Grandma's house.
Oh, that was tough duty.
Yeah. I don't remember much about it. I must have been pretty young.
I don't know if any of you remember it, but Grandma had one of the first laundromats, and it was the old wringer washers with 3 tubs set around it. And there was probably a half a dozen machines, and it was just right up there by the school, the next street down from the school,
Huh.
right there. And I don't know how long she had that. I remember she had 3 dryers, and then it's either 6 or 8 of those washing machines.
Do you know how she acquired it?
No, I don't. I don't remember that. I was real young then.
And you think there was only 6 or 8 machines? Because it seemed like to me there was, just a long row of them.
Yeah.
But
I think that's.
yeah,
You remember that?
I remember it. Do you remember how they had it fixed?
No, I don't
when
remember that.
they had little trenches that went down beside all of the washers, and there were hoses from the washer and the tubs that went over in this little trench, and then it would just run out to I don't know where.
They had a rinse tub, a bluing tub, and a storage tub.
Now,
I think
would
the
people
EPA shut that down.
did people come in and do their laundry, or did she?
No.
Okay,
Or she'd do it for
she would do
people,
it
too.
for them. Huh.
And I don't know if Aunt Annabelle helped her, but I know Mom helped her.
Mother helped her a little bit, I know. But speaking of that, I remember if people wanted, they could bring their own soap and stuff. But
Mhm.
she had this huge container of bleach, and you could go up there and buy a cup of bleach or a pint of bleach or whatever, or you could buy the soap from her.
Wow.
Bet you didn't know that.
I had heard stories of it, but I keep hearing of all these things that Grandma did, and quite an entrepreneur for someone of her in that time frame for women.
Her main income was wallpapering. That was her forte. She wallpapered right up until wallpapering was out of fashion.
I do remember her wallpapering, and didn't she carry that papering table in that big old car she used?
Folded up.
She put it in the. It would stick out the back of her car, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
See, I remember a rack holding it.
Oh, okay.
You think it was in the car?
Well, I was thinking it was. I don't ever remember that.
I was more interested in the car than the papering board.
Which one was that? The Ford?
I don't really know what it was about it.
Her last one was a Chevrolet.
How do you suppose that someone like her, I mean, in that time and time period, afforded a car, a house, a business? I mean, that was.
She worked. I mean, she was an industrious lady. She never sat down with idle hands. If she sat down, she was doing something right up until the time that she died. She was making whatnots. I remember.
Your mother did that too, didn't she?
Yes, she did. It embarrassed me sometimes. You'd go somewhere and she'd be digging cans and stuff out of the trash so she could make her crafts. But yes, I still have things hanging on my wall that my mother had. I bought her a bandsaw one year for Christmas.
Did she use it?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. What do you call that wooden stuff that they saw out in paint?
Oh, that toe
Oh, she
table.
Richard gave her wood, and I think you bought her a couple tools too, didn't you?
Yeah. Sander.
Oh yeah, I've still got stuff hanging on my walls that she made, and I'll never throw away.
I was sharing with some of the girls last night, or Letha and Karen last night, that I have your mom's piano.
Oh, do you?
Mom and Dad's. Actually, I guess it was your dad that played. It wasn't your mom, from what Karen said. Your mom didn't really care about that. Do you remember much about your dad playing?
No, I don't.
I didn't ever hear him, but
He just loved to sing. He wasn't very good.
But didn't he acquire those pianos later after you?
Must
Kids
have.
are
I
almost-
don't even remember.
He did that when he was in Excelsior.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And I remember when he bought I guess it was probably one of the first electrical
Mm-hmm.
ones that he would carry in his truck with him, didn't he?
He could play just about anything, but he wasn't real good at anything. But he could play. He'd pick up a little kid's toy and start playing it.
He just enjoyed music.
Yeah. But he really did enjoy music. And when we were children, I mean, he would go to church singings all the time. I mean, that was his thing. I mean, he just loved that.
Very cool.
That's one thing that I admired about the Butlers, how all of you sang, were good at it.
We may not have been good, but we're loud.
And we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Talking about your mother, being a sweet little lady, she was so industrious, and I can just remember so much time of seeing her working, and just busy doing things, but she always had time to do things for you, and I know when I would go visit her up in Excelsior when she was up there. I don't know how this transpired, but I drove from Kansas City up there one day by myself. She told me where we could get some lamb's quarter greens, and I loved them. So she took me someplace up there in Excelsior Springs, and we picked lamb's quarter greens for a long time. And Wallace thought I was crazy. He had never heard of such a thing. And but anyway, I took them home and put them up in my freezer. And but she was just that way, She was always going to help you do whatever it was you wanted to do. And I enjoyed going up there visiting her when they lived up there.
She did that in her later years. She had correspondence with Ethiopian kids. She had stacks of letters when she passed away that week. And
Well,
she was a pen pal to them. But I remember that as a child when we were all young, going out and picking greens and picking plums for jelly and that sort of thing. That was the little people's job.
Your hands just fit real nicely in there. All right. Excellent job.
I'm Letha Ruth Ward, and I was born July 23rd, 1938 in Thomas, Oklahoma. Was born at home. Live in North Carolina right now. Have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren. Karen?
And I'm Karen Ruth Coffey, and I was also born in Thomas at home, and it was 8th of May. That's what Robert and I used to always say, to be different than everybody else, in 1943. And Robert and I were twins. We were born on the same day, not to be outdone by Letha and Richard and Laverne and Lavetta. I live in Hinton, Oklahoma now, and I have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren.
Maybe you better clarify that twins as being twin cousins.
That's true.
That's right. Okay.
Karen, one of the things that I remember you sharing with me, and I'd love for my other brothers and sisters to hear the stories that you told me about Robert, because I was only in 3rd grade when he was killed, and so it was so neat to hear you telling about the birthday parties and the running around together, and unless that's too difficult, and if it is,
Well,
that's
I'm. You don't care if I cry, do you?
No, not at all.
Like I said, Robert and I were the same age, and I was a little bit older because I was born first, and Dr. Ryan went from our house directly to your mother's home, and fathers and children, and he was very busy that day, I guess, because he forgot to record our birth, and so later when we were approaching the age of driving, we didn't have a birth certificate and no record of our birth. So we had to prove our birth through a delayed birth certificate and get documentation from various people who knew of the event. And Grandma Ho was one of the people who wrote a letter, and well, actually, she had recorded that in a Bible somewhere, and then the school records were appropriate for that need. So we were both able to get our driver's license, but that was delayed because of the delayed birth certificate. anyway, we enjoyed one another, almost as brother and sister, and we planned a lot of things together, like birthday parties that we didn't get approved by our parents in advance, and so I don't remember ever having one, but we planned a lot.
I think you
Or
did have
birthday
at least,
parties.
I think you did at least get by with the first one.
You think? And I remember one thing we liked to do together at school was they had a piece of playground equipment called a giant strike. I don't know if any of you remember that. And it consisted of a really tall, sturdy pole that had some kind of swinging apparatus on it. It was pivoted at the top, and you just achieved the height of that just by the movement of your body. And we both liked that a lot. And I can't remember exactly any other specific things. I was in the 3rd grade. Well, we both had the same teachers, and we were in 5th grade when I moved to Weatherford. And so we didn't have as much time together after that. But
And Weatherford was how far from Thomas?
about 20 minutes, 15 miles.
But that
away.
was a long way back
But
then.
it was a long way back then. If I remember right, we still continued to come to church at Thomas at that time, and so we shared at that time. But and then when Robert passed away, it was difficult for me. Of course, and I think difficult for your parents. Because of the closeness that we shared, and still miss him today.
We didn't
Anything
state-
else we mentioned?
We didn't state who your parents were. That might be helpful.
Oh, yes.
Just so.
Well, our mother is Hazel Barton Roof, which is a sister to Annabelle.
And
Yeah.
she's about a couple of years older,
That's
I
right.
believe.
And our dad is Lee Roof. That was how we knew him, but his official name was Wilburn Lee
Was
Roof.
it Wilburn? Somebody asked me this week, is it Wilburn or Wilbur?
Wilburn.
I thought it was Wilburn.
On Grandma's records, it was Wilbourn.
That's
I think
correct.
that's accurate.
And we lived just across the pasture field from Grandma's house, and we had a beaten path that our family, when we lived in Thomas, would go to and from. And spent a lot of time at Grandma's house, a lot of good memories there. And one time, Mom helped Dad in the field a lot, and I was babysitting I was 10 when Perry was born, and I'm not sure how old he was when I was babysitting him, but not very old. He was up on the table. Why I was letting him be on the table, I don't know. He fell off, and we had a chair that had a nail on the back, and he obviously had stitches. Ran to Grandma's house with Perry. So, Grandma's house was more than just comfort food, sugar cookies. It was in time of emergencies. We ran over there, too.
It's true. Our house was just down the street. I think from Grandma's laundry. I don't know, by today's measurement, it was probably no more than a block, but it seemed like a much longer way. And that's where we were sent when the younger children were born, to Grandma's laundry. And I remember standing out in the road in front of the house, in front of the laundry, looking toward the house because we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I was
We were
told that I wouldn't have to wash the dishes, just go to the laundry. So, but that was unique for us, all 6 children, to be born in the house. When most people, I guess, went to the hospital.
And so Dr. Ryan came there.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Ryan delivered all of you guys too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the small little house, twins.
Was it 4 rooms, right?
Mm-hmm. But they couldn't afford to use a hospital. I think that was the reason for.
Well, also it was customary at the time.
Customary? I thought most people used the hospital.
Did we have
All
a
of-
hospital?
All of it, yes.
Weren't you
And
all-
Gerald,
Wasn't your family born in
I
the
was the
hospital?
first one born in the hospital.
Okay.
Gerald, they were building the hospital, I think. Well, there was one upstairs in that bank building, remember? There was a small hospital there.
But this is for my own curiosity, but I'm always curious what it was like to be cousins of such a big family, you know? What was it like? I know you gave that storybook, and that storybook was just awesome, the way you said about us coming to visit you. And so, I don't know, that'd be neat if, you could think of some stories or thoughts that come to
Well,
mind.
one of my very favorite memories is Sundays. We were all at somebody's house, one or the other, or Grandma's house for as long as I can remember. And it was just understood that everybody brought food and enough food and more for your family. And so when we went to church, we took the food with us, whatever we were contributing to the meal. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And the only place to carry it was in the window behind the back seat. And so that's where it was kept, and in the trunk of the car. And so when church was over, whomever had the privilege, everybody just converged on their home. And I remember after the food, of course, we children played outside a lot, but we were on command to come in and sing when it was time. One of the adults stepped outside and yelled something like, "It's time to sing," and so everybody had to come in and sit around the living room, just wall to wall, and sing. I remember that. And at grandmother's, I remember the kitchen most of all when we all ate there, because there were just stacks and stacks of plates, and everybody was required to participate. So we just did shoulder to shoulder on what seemed like a really nice, long, modern cabinet there on that. Was the north wall. It was the west wall, wasn't it, of the kitchen. And washed dishes forever.
That big old deep sink.
Yes. But I wouldn't trade for that memory, because it was just, you guys were just a part of our family, like brothers and sisters. It's
I
great.
didn't know where one started and the
That's
other one
right.
ended.
That's right.
Well, we just spent so much time together, and we would be at one another's house a lot, and J.H. and L.G., Wayne and I, Richard, I'm not sure if Kleber participated in this, but we had a band. You know, we were all in the band at school, but we would, play church songs and just have a good old time. And on Sunday afternoons, we went to singings many times. And Grandma had made us those cross-stitch dresses, all of us girls.
That's
We'd
right.
have dresses alike, and people would comment how cute we were, all dressed alike in a cross-stitch dress.
They were different colors.
Well,
but
yeah,
the
and
same.
gingham, and she'd spend a lot of time, would have a design and a pattern on it. But,
It was kind of like smocking, but it was cross stitch.
Uh-huh,
not
yeah.
pattern.
mhm. But also, one of the things that I think of the most is when we were 4th of July. We always got together and had homemade ice cream. I don't know if we switched houses, but my memory is when it was at our house in town. So, do you remember that the
I remember
4th of
that.
July ice cream?
I think it was
Celebration.
usually at your house.
Yeah,
Daddy
that's-
and Mother was so scared of fires, and Daddy was too. That,
Uh-huh.
you know, they wouldn't let us do it out on the farm. So I'm sure
Was
that
that
all
in-
of I remember was at your house in town.
Sitting on the back step.
Mhm.
So you think the love of just the connecting and the family, because I'm confident that Mother's responsible for us all being so tight-knit, is that sounds like come from Mother and Grandma and Aunt Hazel are the ones that kind of made
Yeah,
sure
we
on
were just Sundays. Really a close family. And of course, then when I grew up and graduated from high school and went away to work, I didn't get to know the younger ones like Leon and Larry and all. And I miss not getting to know them intimately as growing up like I did the ones my age.
You guys are, to me, kind of like, it's not movie stars, but, it was someone you always heard about, and, and that's what, to me, fascinated me so much about this weekend, is just getting to really hear some of these stories and get to experience some of that. 'Cause
Well, we just had a good time at making up our own play. J.H., Cleaver, Richard, and I were just really close in age, and Cleaver, I think I mentioned Cleaver, but we would, just create games, having a wedding ceremony in the chicken house and stuff like that. Different ones being the bride and the groom.
Didn't need all those fancy toys.
No.
Around the Butler family, there was always a baby that could be your baby.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get into having the babies, we just got married.
I remember the kids, you were always,
Yeah.
They played mother and dad. And
Uh-huh.
You'll be mother, and you'll be dad, and you'll be the
Right.
child, and you
Well,
have to
that's
do all
true.
this stuff.
There was always a weed patch somewhere, and we used to go out there, and I don't know if we trampled down the
Yeah.
weeds,
Yes, we did.
and we'd make rooms.
That's right.
Trample them down and have a house.
And then
Oh,
you'd
my
find
goodness.
stuff, old buckets or whatever, to be your
Sunflowers
furniture.
mostly.
Oh yeah, and
But I remember the younger kids used to gripe and complain because they had to be the little ones, and the parents would tell them what to do all the time.
the older ones were bossy.
Lavette and I played with pre-Barbie dolls a lot. I think those came from like the TGNY, and they were 6, 7 inch tall
Yeah,
dolls.
they were about the size of the Barbies,
Yeah,
or
just
they
like-
might have been a little smaller than
I
the
think
Barbies.
they were a little shorter. I still have one of those, by the way.
Oh, you do. I'd love to see them.
And our mothers made clothes for those dolls.
Well, and we did too.
Right. Later we did.
Yeah,
Is that how you learned to sew so well?
I think it was. It probably was. But I remember spending hours in front of those treadle machines. Making clothes for
We're out of tape.
Good, because we're in conversation.
them.